Welcome to Conversations from St. Norbert College, a program that encourages good discussion in our community on today's local and global issues. Now, your host for Conversations from St. Norbert College, author, professor, and nationally known sports economist, Dr. Kevin Quinn.
Welcome to Conversations from St. Norbert College. I'm Kevin Quinn. Our special guest is author Dr. Jean van Stratum, and we'll discuss Van Stratum's new book about Abbot Bernard Henry Pennings, the man behind the image. Abbot Pennings was the founder of St. Norbert College and the Norbertine Order in the United States. In addition, Van Stratum has written several books about Berne Abbey in the Netherlands, the mother abbey of St. Norbert Abbey in Pere, including an extended translation of a commemorative book titled Prepared for Every Good Work. A remarkable detail is that Abbot Pennings and his biographer share the same birthday. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Well,
yeah.
Welcome to St. Norbert College
and
welcome to Conversations from St. Norbert College. And let me ask you first about who Abbot Pennings was. Maybe not everybody knows.
This depending from what you mean with your question, but Abbot Pennings was a Dutchman, born in a little town called Gemert in 1861. He was from a humble upbringing. His father was a carpenter. His brother later on took over the carpenter's business. The family was not well-to-do, but they were, as far as I have seen, well presented in the village as such. So in that way, what you want to know about his backgrounds, he has studied in the formation program of the Norbertine Abbey, of Berne Abbey as you call it, and that took him 6 years, and in 1886 he was ordained a priest. So I think that's for the moment enough for you.
So he was 25 years old and he was a newly minted priest. And what did he do after that?
Then he started first as a teacher at a small college, which the same abbey had founded in the same year. So he started off with 4 pupils. And it is nice to quote maybe that when he started here St. Norbert College, there were also 4 pupils to begin with. Later on, he became a professor in philosophy and moral theology at the formation of the Berne Abbey. And on top of that, he was entrusted with the care for the novices, and that was his job up till 1893.
1893, and
yes.
Then he came here.
Then he came to Wisconsin, yes.
Why did he come here? It's not sort of not an obvious place, I would imagine.
That's true. It is 4,000 miles from Gemert away. He probably had never heard of Wisconsin at all, and certainly not from the Pere. How he came there is a long story, but I try to short it cut. He heard in the abbey that the Bishop of Green Bay had asked for assistance in a number of Walloon parishes here on the peninsula. And probably the abbot of the monastery asked for volunteers. People who are very positive about Pennings claim that he has volunteered. That makes a good impression, actually. I'm not completely sure about that, because half a year after he had arrived here, he wrote to his family members that being here was a great sacrifice for him. And that doesn't sound, for me, as the sound of a real volunteer. But nevertheless, he came here, started his work at the peninsula in a place called Dulwich. It's nowadays Namur. And he lived there with Brother Servatius. In those days it was quite common that a priest living in a rectory would have a brother to support him. And these two lived there for 5 years. And then Pennings moved to the Pere, took Brother Servatius with him. And from there out started the monastery and the further developments in the country.
So what was the Pere like in 1893? What would it be recognizable to us if we didn't see the river?
I think that's quite difficult for me. I have seen a few old plans, and there you can see certainly that the pier was not very populated. But the main area where the college has been founded, where the monastery is, where St. Joseph's church is, adjoining to the river, that was still well to recognize in these old maps. Yeah.
Well, it's one of the more narrow points of the Fox River, which is why there's a bridge there.
Yep.
Of course, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers got a hold of it and probably made the water flow a little bit differently than it did before. What motivated you to write a book about Abbot Pennings?
In 2006, I came for the first time in the pier, and that was to do additional research for a book you have mentioned, Prepared for Every Good Work. Because Berne Abbey, where Pennings came from, had over the years done a few other mission projects. One was especially in India, and the other one, a large enterprise, was in America. The American mission was not well known in Berne Abbey anymore, and certainly not in the area around. So in that commemorative book, I thought it would be nice to include the mission activities. There was not much of material in Berne Abbey's archives, so I addressed Abbot Neville and asked him if I could come and see in his archives. Now, he was welcome. And then developed things quite quickly. First of all, I came in the crypt and saw that for the first time in my life, the slab covering Pennings' grave. I saw the iconic situation around that, and that triggered me. And we came to talk further on, and I asked the abbot if there was a book about Pennings, because I thought that would be good for my research. He said, no, we don't have. And then he looked so to me and said, maybe you could write it. And so we decided that would happen. And that's, in fact, the background of my start of the research into Abbot Pennings.
Whenever you write a biography of anybody, I would imagine you get to know that person almost personally, almost like a living acquaintance. What kind of a man was he?
Maybe I can start with my answer in this way. There is an American author, Betsy Lerner, and she has written about how to write a biography. And while I wasn't an experienced biographer up till then, I thought it's a good idea to read that book. And in that book, she states on a certain moment that a biographer mostly will identify himself with the subject. And over the years, I noticed that I was doing that too. I became more and more acquainted with Pennings. Also, I have never seen him, never met him, have even never heard him speaking. And but working in the archives, it became more and more clear to me what type of man he could have been. There are, on the other hand, quite a lot of anecdotes about him. The problem with anecdotes is that they are very charming. I could tell you a few very nice stories about Abbot Pennings, but the problem is that these anecdotes start to begin their own life, and they cocoon, in fact, a person, and the real person disappears in the cocoon, and what is left are the anecdotes. And I tried to find out how this man really could have been, and in Pennings' case that is for one point easy, because he has left a lot of correspondence and his famous cash books. On the other hand, he has almost never written about himself. So he didn't keep a diary, he didn't produce memoirs, And the result is then that you have to interpret what you find in the archives, in his correspondence, and in especially the cash books. And from out that, a person came, which I would call a real human being. Not a saint, far beyond that. Not someone who was suggested that he was very frugal. He was also not a man who would always make jokes, and the anecdotes are referring always to these qualities of him. I think he was a very human man, honest, humble, and lived a modest way of life. And I think that has been a very good example for people around him. Yeah, I can tell you far more about what I think that was his character, but I guess that these were a few main things.
I know as a reader of biographies, I'm a big fan. Yeah. One of the things that I try to do, or history as well, I try to figure out, okay, who is this person like who I know? And usually the ones that are interesting, I don't know anybody like that. But, you know, for example, here in the U.S., you know, George Washington, the father of the and if you talk about anecdotes, well, he chopped down the cherry tree, you know, he might have thrown a silver dollar across the Potomac River, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But when you actually, you know, plow into the correspondence, especially correspondence that these folks never thought was going to be read by future generations. You do, you know, get a person who emerges with all the human frailties, etc. So you obviously had an opportunity to look through a lot of correspondence. I mean, he ran the college for
overwhelming.
He has 60 years or something like that.
Yeah.
He was
the president of the college from out the beginning up till his death.
That's a long time. That's a lot of letters.
Yeah.
What were some of the more interesting ones that you came across?
There are quite a few collections of letters. One of the main collections is correspondence he had with a confrère called Francis Xavier Exler. Exler was originally a Dutchman, so you would expect, in fact, that two Dutchmen would write their letters in Dutch, but that wasn't the case. They were always in English from out the beginning.
Oh, that's interesting.
And this correspondence runs over 1918 up till 1953. It was a long time, 90 letters in total. And in these letters, Pennings shows his way of managing human resources. That's maybe a big word, but probably he didn't know it. But you can see that in the lines and over the letters, there was growing a kind of mutual understanding. And you could call it even that Pennings was acting there as the Abba, the father, the pater familias, as they call it. So that meant that he sometimes cursed Exler when he had done certain things which were not okay. In other cases he would praise him. And with all these ups and downs in their relationship, it is moving to see that the last letter, which is preserved of that correspondence, written by Pennings himself, he was almost blind on that moment, so he couldn't keep the lines properly. And that is really how you call that in English? An undulating way of writing. Difficult to decipher, but it shows how fond the old abbot, in fact, was of this man. And that this man was so fond of the old abbot is shown by the fact that this letter was always kept up till the death of Exler himself. And that was one of the nicest correspondence I have seen, but there were others who were also very interesting, having quite sometimes to do with difficulties. People had to accept sometimes his decisions. And Pennings having difficulty to step down a little bit and give in to what they were complaining about. So in that way, it is when you read through them, you get more and more an idea of how this man must have acted. But still, it is suggestion. I can't prove naturally that he has been like that, but I guess I came quite near to it.
Well, if you think about future biographers, how they're going to be able to find this out. I mean, we're not leaving much behind anymore other than emails, and which are hard to get a hold of, blog posts. I mean, not that anybody will write a biography about me, but I'd hate to be defined by my my posts on the local blog or my complaints to the cable company, because I think that's going to be all that's left.
Yeah.
But it was an interesting story because St. Norbert College was founded when he was still fairly new here, maybe 10 years here. Mm-hmm. And it had 4 students, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
How did the idea come about for St. Norbert College?
I guess that it was the original idea which existed in Europe, that a monastery would have, by preference, an own school, so that could be a pond wherein the abbey or the monastery could fish for new candidates. Mm-hmm. It's a bit an unusual equation maybe, but it was an expression which was used in those days quite often. Berne Abbey, where Pennings came from, where he had been a teacher even, had such a construction, an abbey with a school. And I think he has copied that idea here. It was originally meant so for getting new candidates for the monastery. But the Bishop of Green Bay told Pennings quite soon that such an enterprise wouldn't work out properly. He said it is much better to have next to these humaniora studies also economics and math. And there rose a problem because economics and math were not very well taught at the Abbey in Heeswijk. And so the teachers who came with Pennings and were teaching languages and history, etc., they couldn't give these disciplines. So therefore Pennings had to hire lay teachers.
Really?
Yeah, and maybe it is nice to mention that 3 of these lay teachers in no time became Norbertines. Uh-huh. Probably they were attracted by the way Pennings and his companions in those days were living. A bad spirit could think. It caused also, or it gave us the outcome, that Pennings didn't have to pay them.
I believe he would be very suited for modern-day academic administration as well, if that's indeed the case. You're watching Conversations from St. Norbert College. Joining us is author Dr. Jean van Stratum, and we're talking about his new book on Abbot Pennings, the founder of St. Norbert College. The book is titled The Man Behind the Image. Let's talk a little bit more about St. Norbert College in the early days. Yeah. Every small enterprise has various crises along the way. Surely Abbot Pennings must have faced some of those early on. Did you learn anything about any of those?
Maybe not straight into connection with St. Norbert College, because Pennings was the president of the college, but quite soon, from about 1910, I guess, there was already a board of directors. So
very modern.
Yeah, and a board of advisors also, mostly lay people, and that meant that Pennings had not much of direct influence on the college. He had only the influence that when teachers were needed for the college, he had a say, because he could say, no, this man or I can't miss, because he has to go to a parish. And so in that way he could probably, now manipulate is a big word, but he could have his influence. Really nasty problems in the college, as far as I know, Pennings wasn't confronted with. That was a bit different in his managing human resources, where it had to do with appointing confreres for parishes or for new projects. Some would volunteer, but others would wait until the abbot would say, there you go. And that was not always very successful. There's one famous, two famous examples, in fact. One was in Chicago. There in 1900, the Norbertines were asked to take over a parish. And the Norbertine who was sent there, Father Bruns, was one of Pennings' first companions, was a well-seen pastor, and he did a good job. But Pennings was, on some moment, influenced by others who said, we want to start a novitiate here, but that shouldn't start somewhere in the peninsula, that should start in a city. And so Pennings said, that's a good idea, and he immediately took the decision that that would be done. Unfortunately, Bruns was on holidays, and when he came back, he could read in the papers what was decided upon his career, and he didn't accept that. He went into appeal to the Berne Abbot, and the Berne Abbot, for what reason it might have been, decided that Bruns would stay on his place and not removed according to the rule Pennings had made. That has caused a lot of troubles. Both men had difficulty to speak to each other later on. In the end, things became better. Bruns died in 1908, so it's quite soon, from a brain tumor. And I was lucky to find in the archives messages and entries that Pennings had visited him quite a few times in hospital in Appleton, later in Chicago. He came only just half a day too late to be at Bruns's bed before he died. So that's one such a story. Another story is almost at the same time, 1908, when in Manistic, that's Michigan, Pennings was offered a parish, and he had a few people available, but they were already busy. So he chose one and said, you are going to Manistic. And the man got that message by letter, jumped in the train, and came to the pier to protest.
I've been to Manistique. It's not that bad.
Oh, I have never been, but I had the impression that it was not the most pleasant place to be in, certainly in those days. And the man was protesting towards Pennings, and Pennings started a little bit to smile. And that caused this confrère to come to an outburst with heavy words. And the day afterwards, he wrote already a letter full of penitence, but and saying, "Please don't do this to me. It will be my death to have to live there." And so a few of these letters over and again were there. And then on a certain moment, there was a couple of months, no postal traffic, and then a new letter appeared from this confrère, and on the post stamp it was to see it came from Manistique. So in other words, Pennings had won this case, while in other situations sometimes he had to give in. But giving in was not his main character.
Well, I would imagine that if you are going to start and operate a successful organization of any kind, you can't have it entirely my way or the highway, or the organization won't survive very well. Mm. Well, you talked a little bit about his cash box, or the cigar box that is, and that's legendary on campus here, about Abbot Pennings' frugal ways, and maybe here in America we could learn a little bit from those frugal ways. The cash isn't in the box, we're not buying it.
Yeah. Now it is a quite complicated story, when I may say so. I know the story that Pennings seemingly sent confrères on holidays and let them come in his room, and then indeed a cigar box went open. And then he would take a note of $5 and say, "This is for your holidays." Now that is still now in the community a nice item to talk about and to illustrate how frugal he was. But when you look in the cash books, in the journals, and there are 10,000s of entries in them, then you will see that this is not correct. He gave indeed some people $5, but probably they had to go only to Wrightstone or to Little Chute or something like that. People who were living further away got proper travel money. The frugality is also such a myth. It is, I think, very much promoted in a little collection of anecdotes, which is called Pennings Wise and Pound Foolish. That's made by the late confrere Robert Cornell.
Father Cornell was actually elected to Congress at I
know. I have known him. And he thought it nice to publish that. Now, okay, it is charming to read, but it gives also indications, indirect suggestions that Pennings wasn't able to work with big money. That he only would count frugally dimes and nickels and looking twice before he would spend something. And I think that wasn't true. When you look through the cash books properly, then you see how much of a financial route he was following. And he took risks, but he was proud to say in 1941, it was to one of his confreres in a confidential letter, that looking back on all these years, he said, we may be proud that we have gathered a number of properties with a worth on the moment of more than $2 million. I know that will appeal to American people somewhat more than to Dutch, but we would say he has done a very good job. And it means that he wasn't the man of the nickels and the dimes. He would use them, but in fact he was right able to set out a financial policy. And that it sounds not so attractive as a little story about the $5 bills.
It's not as much fun as chopping down the cherry tree. Well, he must clearly have had some vision, and I would say that for a couple of reasons, not only because of the properties, et cetera, that have, as far as I know, really served the order well, the Abbey well here, and the college well for sure. But and I think one of the first television stations that was here was a Norbertine enterprise. It may have come a little bit later. But also, when you look at the biographies of the various Norbertines that have been here that he had an influence on, I mean, people that came of age in the 1930s and 1940s, they were amazing people that were amazingly well educated in many cases and made real contributions to academics. And that doesn't happen if somebody isn't paying tuition for them to go learn and have resources available.
I think so,
There's a biologist here, Anselm O'Keefe, who was an amazing biologist, and his collections are just down the hallway here, actually. That took money, and he got it from someplace. Well, what do you think he would think of St. Norbert College today?
I think he would be very impressed. He would be slightly proud. And
only slightly.
Slightly, yeah. But Pennings wasn't a proud man, and he would what the same Keefe you were mentioning was saying in his
and some Keefe, right?
Yeah, in his funeral speech, funeral sermon, the day before Pennings had his official funeral. There he was telling about how he saw the deceased abbot. And one of the things which was quite moving, I thought, when you read it, is that Pennings had the conviction nothing would be done for Abbot Pennings. It would be always for God. Nowadays we find it maybe a bit highbrow to speak like that. But it was, in those days certainly, very clear what Keefe was meaning there.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time.
Yes.
Thank you very much for joining us today. I hope that you all enjoyed our show today. Until next time, I'm Kevin Quinn. Best wishes for good conversations from St. Norbert College.